if the consciousness is infinite and all-pervading, what's with the inert objects of the world? Only in, as of now, for human beings, only in planet Earth you find living beings. So these living beings are enlivened by this consciousness. And you say this consciousness is infinite and all-pervading, which means this consciousness must pervade the entire observable universe. And this consciousness, if it is infinite, it should pervade the unobservable universe, right? Not only that, if there are parallel universes or multiverses, this infinite all-pervading consciousness must pervade the multiverses too. Now, having analyzed that the individual is combination of this consciousness and the material components, let's analyze a little more about the consciousness, its nature. Because this is where many people differ, many people give different explanations to consciousness. If they are giving the same thing what I am giving is okay. Even whatever I am going to talk about consciousness, if it doesn't appeal to your logic, you can reject it. That's the whole idea. I am not here to preach or impose something which is illogical. Fine. Now, to analyze the nature of consciousness, first thing we understood earlier, it is non-material in nature. Period. It is non-material in nature. Because if it is of material in nature, it has to be inert. So consciousness is non-material in nature and it is self-effulgent. It is consciousness by itself. This is the primary nature of consciousness. You must understand it is non-material in nature. Second aspect, I wouldn't say qualities to it because the next thing I'm going to say is it doesn't have any qualities. An aspect of consciousness is it is independent. Independent meaning it's simple English. It's not dependent on anything for its existence or for its production. Apart from consciousness, what exists is the matter. Matter in the sense the three bodies made of matter. I didn't forget the observable universe. I'm coming to that later. But as of now, you know the three material layers. So this consciousness is independent. It doesn't depend on the material objects for its existence or production of consciousness because it is consciousness by nature. The next quality or next aspect is, next quality is, next attribute is, next aspect is, it is aspectless, qualityless, attributeless. How do you say anything that has a quality? Or only matter will have quality or property attributes. This is attributeless. Because any attribute that you can think of in the world, right from small objects to the biggest object to the observable universe, because I keep on talking about observable universe, that's the maximum anybody can go. Anybody can think of objects in the world. Only those objects will have qualities. Bottom line is only material will have qualities. Only material things will have attributes. Consciousness being non-material in nature, it doesn't have any attributes. This point you must observe. So it doesn't have, it's non-material in nature, it is independent, it doesn't have any attributes. Now, the next aspect of consciousness is it has to be eternal. Now, you see the universe. Universe, space, all put together 3 dimensions. There is one more dimension. 4th dimension for the universe is time. Time is an aspect of matter or the universe or the world. consciousness, because it is non-material in nature, it transcends time. Because time is something that's the fourth dimension of the universe. Universe is nothing but matter. So if you say consciousness is non-material in nature, it has to transcend time. It's beyond time. What is beyond? Anything that is beyond time, anything that captured time, must be eternal, right? Eternal in the sense it exists in the past, it exists now, it will exist in the future. In the past, from infinite, to the future, to infinite. That you call it as eternal. So being non-material, independent, attributeless, eternal, what does it point to? The next thing is you see space, the observable universe is. How much far space can go? Space goes endlessly, and yet it is an aspect of the material world. And consciousness is no way connected to matter. Bottom line, it has to transcend space. Unless it transcends space, then it is not consciousness. If it is consciousness, it has to transcend space, because space being a positive matter. So something that is transcending space, what do you call it as? All pervading, eternal, because it transcended time. Consciousness transcends time. Consciousness transcends space. When it transcends space and time, consciousness must be all pervading. And when it is eternal, it has to be immortal. Consciousness is the all pervading principle in you. Eternal principle. It is consciousness eternal, immortal, and all pervading. The next aspect of consciousness is only the consciousness is real. People always talk about reality. I want to find the reality. What is real? What is real? Now, if you define what is real, then whether we will see whether the universe fits into that or whether consciousness fits into that. For us to conclude that, we need to define what is real. What is reality means. Real is something that must exist in all periods of time. That exists perpetually from the past, that exists now, and that will exist perpetually in the future. That alone you can call it as real. Now try and fit the universe in reality. Universe means including you, individual. Your gross physical body, does it exist in all period of time? It has a shelf life. We studied about the lifespan of the three bodies. The gross physical body, maximum 100 years, after that gone. Even within this 100 years, the gross physical body changes continuously. Within this 100 years of life, the mind changes continuously and the intellect changes. And after death, the subtle body continues. In that continuity, it constantly changes, right? Likewise, does the universe from Big Bang till Big Crunch? It could be billions and trillions of years, we don't know. Even if it is trillions of years, after trillion years, if this universe coalesces into Big Crunch, we call it a state of singularity or state of causal universe. It changed after a long period of time. But throughout that process, what remains unchanging factor is the consciousness, because we saw consciousness is not conditioned by time, it's not conditioned by space. This entire universe that we are talking about, and right from starting from you, the individual, till the universe, all changing factors. The consciousness is the one that existed in the past, exists now in you, and it will continue to exist in the future. So, consciousness is the only reality that you can think of. Next aspect of consciousness is the knowing principle in you. When I say the knowing principle, you declare something that you know. It's a simple example. It's most commonly given example in this philosophical arena. And I say, I know your name. It's a statement of fact. I know your name. The same thing in mathematics, you put a set. I can make a second statement. I know that I know your name. This statement is true, right? I know that I know your name. Then put the set again. I know that I know that I know your name. And that also you know. I know that I know that I know that I know your name. In that knowing, when you remove the object that is known, that name, you can keep on extending up to infinity. I know that I know that I know that I know. That knowing principle is consciousness. Example is the same thing. When you go to a hair salon or a spa, you see like two opposite mirrors. When you stand, your image is reflected endlessly. It's something similar to that. So this consciousness is the knowing principle. Next important aspect of consciousness. This is where people have to pay a little more attention. Consciousness is of happiness in nature. Consciousness is of happiness in nature. When I say that, you as an individual, you all agree, you have to agree that you are a combination of consciousness plus material layers. Body, mind, intellect. Right? Material by itself is inert. This is the same logic that we discussed earlier. Now, in earlier discussions, we talked about unit of happiness, percentage happiness. I'm coming to that. But when you acquire an object that you wanted, when you get that object, you feel a sense of happiness. Who is feeling happy? You. You are who? An individual. The individual is what? Combination of consciousness plus the material layers. We know the material layers will be inert, insentient. So, when you get an object that you want, when you get it, when you feel a sense of happiness, that happiness belongs to whom? From where that what is the source of that happiness? Because you take out the inert aspects in your personality, what remains is the consciousness. So, whenever you feel a sense of happiness, that's nothing but a small reflection of the consciousness in your personality. When you completely identify with the consciousness, you become one with consciousness, or you become happiness. Now, this sounds okay, you'll be happy, but how much happy? That's where you will have to go back to the video 5, logic behind capturing infinity. We discussed how we concluded there is one way to get your personality to infinity, and it so happens that infinity ends up with infinite happiness. I am not going to explain that logic in detail now. We can only, at this, the point I am trying to prove is consciousness is of happiness in nature, and the quantum of happiness is infinite. How it is infinite, you will have to go back to the video number 5. Again, we will discuss that in future classes, but right now we are only discussing the different aspects of consciousness. So, consciousness is happiness in nature. Now, I have listed so many qualities of consciousness. All these qualities put together, where it points consciousness is infinite. The finite is the gross physical body, the material layers of the individual and the universe, they are all finite. Consciousness is infinite in nature. Now go back to the logic behind capturing infinity. We said you as an individual, you have a potential to catapult yourself to infinity. We discussed the aspects of consciousness and I. We concluded that I is equal to consciousness and the consciousness is infinite in nature. And that infinity is happiness in nature. So, with this, we can make a statement: consciousness is equal to I, is equal to you, is equal to infinite, is equal to infinite happiness. Now, keeping that aside, what we discussed, now the next natural question that one would ask, or if you are thinking, you must be asking, you are only analyzing the individual's gross body, subtle body, causal body. They are material in nature, inert in nature. If it is inert, it cannot be having consciousness, it cannot generate consciousness. So there is a consciousness principle pervading or combining with this inert matter. So individual is sentient and conscious. And you also establish that consciousness is infinite. If the consciousness is infinite and all pervading, what's with the inert objects of the world? Only in, as of now, for human beings, only in planet Earth you find living beings. So these living beings are enlivened by this consciousness. And you say this consciousness is infinite and all pervading, which means this consciousness must pervade the entire observable universe. And this consciousness, if it is infinite, it should pervade the unobservable universe, right? Not only that, if there are parallel universes or multiverses, this infinite all-pervading consciousness must pervade the multiverses too, isn't it? Then why are those inert objects are not running and walking? Why not the camera is jumping? Why not the other inert objects are not showing any sentiency? The answer is they are inert because they don't have the subtle body, number one. When they don't have the subtle body, then the consciousness pervades through them, gives only the power of inertia. We talked about 4 powers, you remember? Knowing power, desiring power, and acting power. A human being has the knowing power, desiring power, and acting power. And in deep sleep, the inertia power of the individual takes over. The individual goes to deep sleep. In deep sleep, you can equate the personality as good as an inert object, right? As good as, I'm not saying, because there are some involuntary actions functioning. But in the other inert objects that you see, rock and stone, in all those inert objects, the 3 powers are not there. There is no knowing power, there is no desiring power, there is no acting power. They all hold only the inertia power. This consciousness enlivens the inertia power, enlivens the inertia power of the entire observable universe, unobservable universe, parallel universes, multiverses. If they are, I am not saying they are there, I am not saying they are not there, because we don't know. Earth is a tiny small speck in the entire cosmos. So these inert objects are enlivened by consciousness by providing the power of inertia for it to merely exist. So this is applicable for the entire gross universe. Same is applicable for entire subtle universe and the causal universe that we discussed earlier. So this one aspect that you need to know for people who are having doubts about what is the consciousness doing with the inert objects. With this understanding, we will just quickly recapitulate and have some better understanding about the I. All the while we have only understood I, the individual, as the gross physical body, mind and intellect, right? So now you got a different perspective. The real I is the consciousness, and this real I, when you equate to consciousness, you must understand I, the consciousness, is non-material in nature. One. Next, I means not something I means I am talking about you. You or I, when I say, because for sake of convenience I say I. When I say I, you tell yourself I. You repeat what I say. Then it will make some sense. The I equal to consciousness, and that consciousness is non-material in nature. I equals consciousness, and it is an independent entity enlivening your body, mind and intellect. And this consciousness is not part of your body, mind and intellect. It's not part, it's only an enlivening principle, and it is an independent entity in your personality. Then this I, the consciousness, is attributeless. We discussed. This I, the consciousness, is self-effulgent. It is consciousness in nature by itself. And this I, the consciousness, is eternal. Eternal in the sense, even after your body, mind and intellect dead and gone, consciousness persists. And we know the I, the consciousness, is all-pervading, and it's not only limited to your personality, it pervades you, it pervades the entire universe and beyond. If it is all-pervading, eternal, infinite, consciousness I equals one. One means non-dual. This I consciousness is non-dual in nature. And we also know the I consciousness is the knowing principle. It's the enlivening principle. And I, the consciousness, is happiness in nature. And finally, I, the consciousness, is infinite. So if we have to say I, the consciousness, is infinite, infinite happiness, one, non-dual, and I say I, and I say I, this individual I. It doesn't stop there. When you tell yourself, your individual I. And all the human being, when they say I, and when they say is infinite and non-dual one, so in all human beings, the consciousness is the same one infinite principle. So the I in you is the same I in me. The consciousness in you is the same consciousness in me. Not only the same consciousness in me, the same consciousness is in all living beings. And that is that I. Keep it on one side. Until now, we are only analyzing systematically, logically, giving proof what is matter, what is non-matter, what are the properties of matter, what could be the properties of propertyless consciousness. We have listed so many properties of propertyless consciousness. Instead of saying property of consciousness, or we can say indicators. Indicators, these are indicators or pointers of consciousness. These are all discussions that are meant for scientists. As I told from the beginning, the whole video classes is named Capturing Infinity, and it's primarily addressing people who are in the field of science and astrophysics and quantum physics, who are somehow wanting to know what is infinity. So this is as far as the science aspect is concerned. Keeping it on one side, there is another realm of study, the whole world, which I deliberately don't want to get into. That is religion, right? There are so many religions in the world. There are so many religious masters have come and gone. So many prophets have come and gone. But they all talk about a principle called God. And everybody talks about God, and they are all right in their own way. But when those spiritual masters, religious masters talk about God, that God has to be infinite, isn't it? If it is God, if there is something or somebody, or if there is an entity called God, God must be infinite, period. If it is finite, then it's not God. This is one side. Another side, we just now concluded, I, the consciousness, is infinite, all-pervading reality. So one side we say God will be infinite, must be infinite. Another side we establish I, the consciousness, is infinite. And you are logical thinkers, if you are logical, you can be a thinker, fine. How many infinite there can be? There cannot be two infinites, isn't it? So with this we can only conclude what all the spiritual masters were trying to do is to teach these aspects which we discussed in the past few hours of classes. All the masters are talking about the same thing. How do I say that? Maybe I can give the quotes of different masters, different religious beliefs. The core message I am going to tell, people can refute it. In the Old Testament, what God reveals to Moses, I am that I am. It equates to infinite. What is that I? I am that I am. I have seen in remote villages in India, there is a church called I am that I am church. So there is a specific group of people who believe in the Old Testament and they catch hold of this statement, I am that I am. That's as far as the Old Testament is concerned. As far as the New Testament, what Christ had to say? Lord Christ emphatically declares, the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is one of the primary statements of Jesus Christ. And Prophet Muhammad declares, the greatest jihad is conquest of yourself within you. And needless to say, Lord Krishna says, I am the self in all beings. And the Vedas declare, the self is God. So all the different religions talk about the same infinite consciousness principle, and that is I. So this is as far as the spiritual masters are concerned. But I am not getting into the deeper minor aspects or the branches of every religious belief. I am not talking about that. I am talking about the core message given by the specific masters of different religions. So this is just one additional evidence that what every human being is aspiring for. That apart, few scientists have made some research in consciousness, made a lot of research in quantum physics, but well-known scientists have made some statements. I don't know exactly, so I just read out verbatim what they said. So perhaps it can give you some clue about consciousness. We talked about Erwin Schrödinger's cat experiment. We ridiculed the cat, but in real, Erwin Schrödinger states, consciousness is never experienced in the plural, only in the singular, of which the plural is unknown. There is only one thing, and that is what seems to be a plurality, and it is merely a series of different aspects of this one thing produced by deception. Then the other scientist, Max Planck, we all know about Planck's constant, so many constants that he had given. Max Planck, he states, I regard matter as derivative of consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness, and everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulate consciousness. And there is one more scientist, George Wald. George Wald says, though consciousness is the essential condition of all science, science cannot deal with it. Consciousness itself lies outside the parameters of space and time. I believe to that effect, famous scientist Einstein Stephen Hawking, they all have declared similar, they have taken similar position about consciousness. So whatever that we are discussing, we don't need scientists to validate it. But I'm only saying, even scientists who are pioneer in the field of quantum physics, astrophysics, they all thought about consciousness. To some extent, they have come to the same conclusions that we have discussed just now.